Today, we're diving into some of the most shocking and downright bizarre animal attacks ever recorded. From a horse that exploded, yes, you heard that right, exploded in front of a stunned 28-year-old woman, to the rare and tragic case of a 16-year-old boy killed by a cassowary bird. These stories will leave you speechless. And just when you think it couldn't get any stranger, we're ending with a flying bear killing 2 people. But before we get there, we start with the gruesome story of a 30-year-old man devoured by a ravenous school of piranhas. It was a warm Saturday afternoon in Brasilândia, Minas, a rural municipality located about 600 miles northwest of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the small, tranquil lake. 3 friends, 2 middle-aged men and a 30-year-old man, had arrived at the lake early that afternoon, eager to spend a relaxing day fishing. They set up their gear near the shoreline, casting their lines into the calm waters. The faint rustling of leaves and distant chirps of birds were the only sounds as they chatted lightly, the stillness of the surroundings giving the impression of an ordinary, peaceful day. The first few hours passed uneventfully. The men pulled in several fish, their laughter mixing with the soft sounds of nature. But as they continued fishing, a low buzzing sound interrupted the calm. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it soon grew louder. The sound expanded into a deafening roar as the men looked around, puzzled. Within moments, the air was thick with the massive bees, their dark bodies swarming around the men. The 3 friends immediately recognized the danger. These were Africanized honeybees, notorious for their aggression and relentless defense of their hives. Unlike the common honeybee, which might sting only when provoked, these bees were quick to swarm and attack in large numbers. Panic spread quickly as they felt the sharp pain of stings on their arms, faces, and exposed skin. They swatted at the bees, but the swarm was too large. Each sting felt like a sharp jab, a fiery sensation that seemed to spread faster than they could respond. The men scattered, desperate to escape the relentless swarm. The 30-year-old, unable to tolerate the pain, made a rash decision. In a moment of panic, he jumped into the lake, hoping the water would offer some relief from the stings. His 2 friends, not far behind, followed him into the water. For a brief moment, the cool water offered a reprieve. The bees, hovering near the shoreline, seemed to retreat as the men submerged themselves. But the lake, though a temporary sanctuary from the bees, held a far greater danger beneath its calm surface. Hidden just below the water's surface was a school of piranhas, drawn to the slightest disturbance and the scent of blood. The blood from the bee stings, though minimal, was enough to trigger their feeding instincts. At first, the men only felt the soothing relief of the water. The pain from the bee stings still throbbed in their skin, but the coolness of the lake temporarily dulled it. But soon, they felt sharp, biting pains in their legs, arms, and feet. The water churned as piranhas, attracted to the blood, began to attack. The men screamed, thrashing in the water as the fish bit into their skin. The piranhas, once passive, had now transformed into voracious predators. The men, already weakened by the bee stings, struggled to swim against the pain. The water around them became turbulent as the piranhas closed in, their sharp teeth sinking into flesh with alarming speed. The 2 middle-aged men fought to reach the shore, pushing themselves through the water despite the sharp pain of the bites. The 30-year-old, still caught in the frenzy, struggled to keep afloat. The fear of being torn apart by the piranhas added to his panic. Despite his desperate attempts, he was overwhelmed. The piranhas surrounded him, their teeth tearing at his skin, dragging him under the water. His friends, already on the shore, screamed in horror, but there was nothing they could do. The lake had become a death trap, its calm waters concealing a deadly predator. The attack was swift, lasting only minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When the water settled, the 30-year-old was gone. His friends, still shaking from the ordeal, called for help. Divers were dispatched to search the lake. The following day, his body was found 13 feet from the shoreline. The extent of the damage was chilling. His body was covered in lacerations from the piranhas, with large chunks of flesh missing. The damage to his face, ears, and limbs was enough to suggest that he had been in the water long enough for the piranhas to feast on him. The wounds from the piranhas' bites were deep, and the skin around them was raw and torn, showing signs of prolonged submersion. His body had been ravaged, stripped of its flesh in places, leaving behind a gruesome sight. Investigators deemed the event a tragic accident with no signs of foul play, but the cause of death remained uncertain. The man's body showed clear evidence of blood loss, likely from the piranha's relentless attack. Whether he had drowned or succumbed to shock was unclear. Some speculate that the piranha's assault had caused him to bleed out, while others thought fear and disorientation from the attack might have contributed to his drowning. In the end, the cause of death was a combination of factors, and the result was the same. He lost his life in the very lake that had once seemed peaceful. The piranha attack was nothing short of horrifying. But just when you think it couldn't get any more gruesome, this next story will leave you speechless. It's about a bizarre and tragic incident involving an explosive horse that fatally injured a woman. As unbelievable as it sounds, this shocking event is entirely real. Let's dive right into the details. It was November 29, 2011 in Ocala, Florida. The morning sun had just begun its climb over the horizon, casting pale light on the Kentucky Equine Sports and Rehabilitation Center. The facility stood quiet, its expansive grounds a testament to the specialized care provided to the area's prized equine athletes. Erica Marshall was already at work, her focus as steady as ever. The 28-year-old veterinary professional had spent the last 2 years at the center, operating the hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber with precision and care. Born and raised in Medford, New Jersey, Erica had always possessed an extraordinary connection with animals. Horses in particular seemed to respond to her with a trust that was almost uncanny. Her journey had taken her across the Atlantic to Hartpury College in England, a prestigious institution renowned for its equine studies program. There, her dedication and skill earned her accolades and honed her expertise in animal care. It was also where she met Kieran, the love of her life. The two married just a year earlier and had settled into a promising life in Ocala. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, a critical tool in equine rehabilitation, was part of Erica's daily routine. The treatment used pressurized oxygen to promote healing in horses, speeding recovery from injuries and conditions like equine protozoal myeloencephalitis or EPM. Erica was skilled at managing the delicate balance of pressure and oxygen, ensuring the safety and comfort of the animals under her care. On this particular morning, she was monitoring a horse undergoing therapy for EPM. It was a process the horse had undergone several times before without issue. Yet today, something was different. The horse became restless, its powerful body shifted uneasily, steel-clad hooves ringing against the chamber floor. Erica's trained eye caught the subtle signs of agitation. She adjusted the controls, her calm actions meant to reassure the animal. But the tension in the chamber grew. Without warning, the horse reared, its hind legs striking the chamber's padded interior. The force of the kicks penetrated the padding, exposing the metal wall beneath. Sparks ignited as the metal shoe scraped against the surface, setting off a catastrophic explosion. The hyperbaric chamber, designed to withstand immense pressure, failed under the violent force. Shrapnel tore through the facility, shredding walls and scattering debris over the surrounding area. The explosion's sound echoed across the countryside, heard as far as 30 miles away. Erica Marshall, standing closest to the chamber, died instantly. The horse, too, was killed, its life ending as abruptly as the explosion began. Sorcha Monally, a 33-year-old colleague from Ireland, was nearby when the explosion occurred. She suffered severe injuries as the blast threw her across the room. Airlifted to Sean's Hospital in Gainesville, Sorcha underwent emergency surgery. Against the odds, she survived, though her recovery was long and arduous. The aftermath of the explosion left the equestrian community in shock. The facility's exterior walls were blown apart, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. Local authorities arrived to find rubble strewn across the grounds, the smell of scorched metal and earth lingering in the air. Erica's husband, Kieran, working nearby, rushed to the site only to find his life irreparably shattered. For him, Erica had been more than a wife. She was a partner whose passion and kindness left an indelible mark on everyone she met. Investigations into the explosion revealed troubling details. The hyperbaric chamber, a cornerstone of the center's rehabilitation program, had a history of malfunctions. Reports indicated that it had not been properly maintained, raising serious questions about the facility's safety protocols. Hyperbaric chambers, while invaluable for equine therapy, require rigorous upkeep to prevent accidents. The failure to address these issues proved fatal. The explosion's force had devastating physiological effects. The intense pressure change caused severe internal injuries, including lung collapse and blunt trauma. Shrapnel from the chamber's rupture acted like high-speed projectiles, compounding the destruction. These combined factors made survival impossible for Erica and the horse. The equestrian community mourned the loss, with many pointing to this tragedy as a stark reminder of the importance of safety in animal care facilities. Kieran, who was in the room when the explosion happened, filed a lawsuit against the center seeking accountability for Erica's death. The legal battle highlighted the negligence surrounding the chamber's maintenance. It also sparked a broader conversation about the need for stricter safety measures in veterinary facilities. The pressure chamber, once an asset to the center, remained closed, its damaged structure a haunting reminder of the cost of oversight failures. The closure of the chamber had significant consequences for the local equestrian community. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy was a vital part of rehabilitation for injured horses, and its loss left a gap in care options. Erica's heartbreaking story is a reminder of how unpredictable wild animals can be. As you may know, in this video we're exploring some of the most bizarre and shocking animal attacks on humans. And we've got to tell you, the stories only get more intense from here. Up next is the tragic story of a young boy whose walk with his dog and brother took a completely unexpected and fatal turn because of a bird. It was January 28, 2007 in Mossman, Queensland, a small rural area known for its lush sugarcane fields and quiet, secluded forests. The sky was still dark, the air heavy with the remnants of an overnight rainstorm. The ground, soft and slick, held the scent of wet earth as two young brothers, Philip and Granville McLean, and their dog ventured out before the sun had fully risen. Their task was simple: to search for their horses, which had wandered off during the night. As they moved through the dense underbrush, the sound of the forest filled the air. Birds called in the distance, and the rustling of leaves marked the movement of small creatures. The brothers, accustomed to the land, walked with purpose but without haste. They were no strangers to the terrain, and the dense jungle had long since lost its mystery to them. But today there was something different. The stillness of the morning seemed too quiet, the air too thick. Neither of the boys could pinpoint the exact reason, but something was wrong. As they reached the clearing near the sugarcane fields, the scene before them was a chilling one. Their dog, which had been moving ahead, now stood cornered. And it wasn't just any corner, it was the territory of one of the most dangerous creatures alive, a cassowary. The cassowary, standing at nearly 6.5 feet tall, with its bright blue skin and a large yellow casque perched on its head, was a terrifying sight. Its three-toed feet, each armed with a sharp talon that could grow up to 5 inches long, were planted firmly on the ground as it stared down the dog. Its gaze, cold and unblinking, was fixed on the animal, its body coiled like a predator ready to strike. Granville, seeing the dog in danger, rushed forward without hesitation, shouting to the bird in an attempt to scare it away. But the cassowary, undeterred, lashed out with terrifying speed. A single strike from its powerful leg sent Granville crashing to the ground. His leg struck with such force that he felt his bones rattle. Philip, seeing his brother on the ground, knew there was no time to lose. He grabbed the horse bridle slung over his shoulder and approached the cassowary, determined to protect his brother and the dog. He swung the bridle with all his strength, aiming for the bird's head. But the cassowary wasn't intimidated. With an almost predatory speed, it shifted its stance and struck out at Philip. The talon of the cassowary's foot sliced through the air, its sharp point finding its mark in Philip's neck. The force of the blow sent him staggering back, his vision blurring as the warm, sticky sensation of blood soaked through his shirt. Philip's breath came in shallow gasps, his hands instinctively pressed to the wound, but it was too late. He knew it. The bird, after its strike, stood tall, watching the brothers with its cold, unblinking eyes. The dog, still cowering, had escaped the bird's wrath for the moment, but there was little chance of saving Philip now. The cassowary seemed indifferent to the human pain it had caused, its focus now solely on the scene before it, unyielding in its territorial defense. Philip, despite the pain, tried to move. His legs, heavy and weak, betrayed him as he began to run, stumbling through the wet grass. The wound in his neck bled profusely, and every step brought him closer to collapse. He pushed on, trying to make it home to safety, but his body was failing him. Granville, still on the ground, called out to him, but there was no response. Philip didn't slow down. He made it 200 yards before his body gave out. His knees buckled and he collapsed face first into the mud. The sound of his final breath was lost in the stillness of the morning, the forest around him seemingly untouched by the tragedy that had just occurred. The cassowary, after ensuring its victory, turned and disappeared into the undergrowth. It left behind nothing but the mangled body of its would-be attacker and the shattered lives of those left behind. The bird's retreat was as silent as its advance had been. In the quiet, forgotten corners of the Australian wilderness, its legend continued to grow, silently warning all who ventured too close. By the time Granville managed to drag himself to his feet and run to his brother's side, it was already too late. Philip was gone, his life taken by the very bird he had tried to protect them from. Granville screamed for help, but there was no one around for miles. Alone, with only the dog as company, Granville was left to carry the weight of the unimaginable loss. After some time, the authorities were notified, and by the time they arrived, the bird was nowhere to be found. The forest was searched, but the cassowary had returned to the depths of the wilderness, back to its domain. The only sign it had left behind was the horror it had wrought in the McLean family's life. The story of Philip McLean's tragic death became a cautionary tale. Despite the bird's elusive nature, it was clear that when provoked, the cassowary was a force to be reckoned with. The attack, the first recorded fatality from this magnificent yet deadly bird, left an indelible mark on the community. It served as a reminder of the unpredictable dangers that lay hidden in the wild, where even the most seemingly benign creatures could pose an unexpected threat. The cassowary, with its prehistoric appearance and lethal power, had earned its place among the world's deadliest creatures. While its behavior remained largely a mystery to researchers, its reputation for aggression was well known to those who had encountered it. Philip McLean's story is one that will undoubtedly be talked about for decades. It's truly bizarre. After all, you don't often hear about someone being killed by a bird. But have you ever heard of a flying bear causing multiple fatalities? Our next story takes an even stranger turn as we dive into the unsettling tale of a bear with incredibly unusual behavior. Let's get into the last and most intense story of this whole video. It was September 18, 2018, under the starry sky in Quebec, not far from Ottawa. The rural stretch of Highway 148 lay quiet, surrounded by dense woods and open fields. The road marked the transition from one small town to another, the land stretching out on either side. It was a place where nothing ever seemed to happen, a road usually empty with little more than the occasional passing vehicle or the whisper of the wind through the trees. But on this particular night, it would bear witness to a tragedy unlike any other. The Pontiac Sunfire, driven by two young men ages 19 and 23, was heading down the road, its headlights slicing through the darkness. The driver, a man in his early 20s, kept his focus ahead, his hands steady on the wheel. His friend sat beside him, their voices drifting between them as they casually chatted, unaware of the sudden danger that was about to present itself. The night air felt still, almost too still. Then, without warning, the calm shattered. A massive 300-pound black bear emerged from the trees, stepping directly into the Sunfire's path. It seemed to materialize from the shadows, its dark form nearly invisible against the night until it was too late. The driver reacted instinctively, slamming on the brakes, but the bear was already too close. The car's low-slung design sent the massive animal hurtling into the air with violent force. Its body twisted and flipped before crashing back to the pavement, landing heavily in the path of an oncoming vehicle. The impact jolted the Sunfire violently. It swerved sharply, veering off the highway and into a ditch with a bone-rattling thud. Inside, the two men were slammed against their seatbelts but escaped uninjured, the car's frame miraculously holding up against the collision. Dazed but unharmed, they took a moment to gather themselves, adrenaline coursing through their veins as they processed the surreal scene. The road fell silent again, but the stillness was heavy, punctuated only by the sight of the lifeless bear sprawled across the asphalt, its massive 6-foot frame blocking the lane. Yet there was no time to linger. Another vehicle was approaching fast. A Nissan Pathfinder, a large SUV, came into view, traveling in the opposite direction. Inside were a young couple and their friend. The driver, a 25-year-old woman from Ottawa, guided the car along the quiet highway, her boyfriend beside her in the front seat. Their friend, a 40-year-old man, relaxed in the back. The night was serene, the hum of the engine and the occasional chirp of crickets the only sounds accompanying their journey. But as they neared the Sunfire, the calm began to unravel. Then, just ahead, a loud crash rang out. The woman's eyes widened as she tried to process the source of the noise. Before she could react, something massive and dark came hurtling toward them as if it had fallen from the sky. It was the bear, propelled by the momentum of its initial collision with the Sunfire. The 300-pound bear smashed through the windshield with the force of a speeding bullet, its body crashing into the interior of the SUV before it was violently ejected out the back window. The destruction was catastrophic. The vehicle came to a halt in the middle of the road, the sound of shattering glass still echoing in the air. The woman, once full of life, was slumped over the steering wheel, her blood staining the seat beneath her. Her boyfriend, still in shock, stared ahead blankly, unable to process what had just happened. His gaze drifted slowly to the back seat where their friend lay, pinned by the twisted wreckage of the vehicle. The man was unrecognizable, his body crushed beneath the mangled frame of the SUV. The impact had claimed both lives instantly, leaving the boyfriend as the sole survivor. The young man sat motionless in the wreckage, his heart pounding as he tried to comprehend the scene unfolding around him. The woman he loved, the woman who had been beside him just moments earlier, was gone in an instant. The man he had called a friend, who had shared countless memories with them, was now lost as well. The shock of it all hit him in waves, but there was no time for grief. His world had shattered completely, leaving only the deafening silence of the night. Minutes later, the first responders arrived, their flashing lights cutting through the darkness. The sound of sirens filled the air, but for the young man, everything was already silent. His mind was numb, unable to process what had just happened. The police and paramedics worked around him, but he remained motionless, lost in a haze of disbelief as he stared at the wreckage. The events of that night were soon pieced together. The bear, as it turned out, had been wandering outside its usual territory during the annual mating season, a time when male bears roam in search of females in heat. A local hunting guide had warned drivers in the area to be extra cautious during this time, as such occurrences were more common. Still, no one had anticipated a bear wandering onto Highway 148. Bears were rarely seen in this area, and the chances of such a collision were low. But on that night, it was a strange twist of fate that led to the catastrophic event. The two men in the Pontiac Sunfire had swerved off the road in their attempt to avoid the bear, the car coming to a stop far from the destruction that followed. The bear, with its 6-foot body, had flown through the air, its trajectory leading it directly into the path of the Nissan Pathfinder. The SUV's occupants had been utterly unprepared for the impact, with the bear's weight and force overwhelming the vehicle in a matter of seconds. In the aftermath, the young woman whose life had been cut short in an instant was remembered by those who knew her for her vibrant spirit. Her boyfriend, left behind in the wreckage of their shattered world, was inconsolable, the weight of the loss too much to bear. The 40-year-old friend, another casualty of the bear's violent impact, was mourned by his own family and friends. The emptiness left in the wake of the tragedy was immeasurable, and the scars would remain with the survivors forever. The bear, too, had not survived the crash. Its once powerful body had been torn apart by the collision, leaving its fate intertwined with that of the victims. In the end, the tragic events of that night would be a haunting reminder of the unpredictable dangers of the wild, and how life can change in the blink of an eye.